Hello, this is Play the Man, and we're on to chapter 5, entitled Protection. Maurice and I were married in the front room of our house on 18th of April 1989, and the very next day we went to the registry office in the centre of Manchester to go through a legal ceremony and get our marriage licence. Once the formalities were over, we were taken that very day to the airport and flew out to America, as God had told us to go to New York. This was not a honeymoon, quite the contrary. God had for several months given us vision after vision, confirmation after confirmation, that He wanted us to visit this city, yet we did not know why. When we shared our intentions with friends, they had very kindly given us words from the Lord, that we would meet an angel on the plane or in the airport who would tell us where to go and what to do. Unfortunately, after we'd been sitting in the airport for a few hours, this is when we were in America, we realised that these well-meaning friends had spoken out of their own imaginations, because we were completely alone and hadn't a clue where we were supposed to go or what we were supposed to do. As we'd landed in the city without anywhere to stay and no person to contact, Maurice looked around the airport to see if there were any advertisements for hotels, hostels, anything. We saw by the telephone kiosks various cards pinned up on the boards, so we looked through them. As they were free telephone numbers, he phoned a couple to see how much they charged for rooms, and was mortified to find that the money we had brought with us would be used up after 2 nights' board if God didn't do something fast. Maurice was forced to take up residence for the first night in one of these hotels and prayed frantically that God would direct us somewhere else the next day. He'd been saddled with a new wife, me, and sent to New York on a mission without any financial backing, and he was sweating, wondering how we were going to last out here for the next fortnight. I didn't know Maurice was going through all this turmoil. I'd just got married. You have no idea how I felt. Ever since I was 15 years old, I'd taken care of myself. I'd earned my own living, rented my own apartment, paid my own bills, bought my own furniture. But now, suddenly, just after saying some words and accepting a ring, I felt totally free of responsibility. I was now Maurice's concern, for he was my husband. Even though Maurice tried to explain the seriousness of the situation we were in, that we might have to end up in the subway, where all kinds of desperate people lurked, it didn't worry me in the slightest. I felt totally safe and secure because I was Maurice's responsibility now, and I expected him to look after me. Men, you've no idea what it is like for a woman to feel that she belongs, to be owned, covered, protected. And that's exactly how she should feel at all times, whether she's married or single. According to the Bible, God intended that a virgin, the biblical term for that is an unmarried woman, would stay in her parents' home under the covering of her father until the day she was married. And then she would swap her father's covering for that of her husband. The woman was never expected to be independent. She wasn't made for that purpose. God made the woman specifically so that she could belong to a man and enrich his life, to be a helpmeet suitable for him, so that he could develop and together they could reach their full potential in God. Her role in society was to serve her husband and bear and bring up his children, to stay at home and keep house, and by her attitude and lifestyle bring honour to her husband. Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 31 gives a wonderful description of a virtuous woman. But sadly, although Solomon had 300 wives and 700 concubines, he claimed he was not able to find one virtuous woman among them. Well, you can't say he didn't try. A couple of months after our return from New York, and yes, God did take care of us, and we were totally unharmed, we went on our honeymoon to Corfu. We were both completely happy. We'd always been the best of friends, but now there was an added dimension to our relationship, which brought us so close in body, mind and spirit. We knew that God had blessed us both by giving us the right partner in each other. For me, personally, I never once felt that I was taking a risk with Morris. I knew him so well that I didn't need to find out anything about him. There was no real adjustment period, other than that now my bedroom was no longer completely mine, it was half his as well. I had envisaged that the sight of my wedding ring would command respect, and men who had entertained ideas about me would now keep their distance, respecting the fact that I was a married woman and belonged to someone else. But even on my honeymoon, I realised that wasn't the case. Morris wanted to try his hand at water skiing. So I sat in the speedboat with the instructor as Morris was pulled behind. Morris had never done this activity before, and the ski instructor was bent on making an impression on me by showing how incapable Morris was at this sport. He did his best to make Morris fall off the skis and managed to do it countless times during his trip up and down the seafront. I sat there, clicking away with my camera when he was up and when he was down, and every time the instructor caught my eye, he would make embarrassing suggestions to me. I flashed my wedding ring, but that didn't matter one bit. Eventually, on Morris's final turn round the seafront, he managed to stay upright for so long that when the speedboat was brought to the shore, Morris skied onto the sand. Apparently, everyone on the beach had been watching Morris's efforts out there on the water and had found it immensely entertaining. As he came gliding on top of the water to land upright on his skis on the beach for the one and only time of this entire session, the whole beach exploded into spontaneous applause, much to the chagrin of the instructor, and warmed us so much that it made even this potentially dangerous episode turn out to be fun. But it showed me how blatant men can be if they want to attract a woman's attention, and how vulnerable and in need of protection women are. I remember another occasion when I went back to work shortly after I was married. I was with a temporary employment agency because I didn't want permanent work, and they sent me to help out in an administration office at Manchester University. Everyone notices the new person, and you have to expect that you're going to be stared at. But I had imagined that when you were married and wore a ring that men, would respect that and not put any pressure on you. But I was wrong. I'd only been there a couple of days when one of the lecturers asked me out for a lunchtime drink. I said thank you, but no, I was married. To which he replied, that was no problem. He was married too. During the following weeks, more and more pressure was applied to me until I left for other employment. In Numbers 30, there is a clear distinction made between men and women concerning any vow they make to God. As far as the man is concerned, if he makes a vow to God, then he was expected to fulfill that vow, and under no circumstances was he allowed to break his promise. But it was totally different for a woman. If she was single and made a vow to God whilst living in her father's house, and he heard it and disallowed it, then God said she was not bound by the vow, that he would forgive her and she would be free of her promise. The same with a married woman. If her husband refused to allow her to keep her vow, then she too would be forgiven and freed from it. Here again is a case of women being under the protection of men. Because of their emotional and spiritual vulnerability, and I say spiritual because Eve, not Adam, fell for the serpent's deception, God has made it that they are not held responsible for their actions, whereas the husband or father is. Just as parents take responsible for what their children do under a certain age, so it is with women. Men are responsible for their wives.